7. Statements of a foolish person. There's a difference between ignorance and foolishness. Ignorance is not knowing. That's correctable. You learn, you grow, you move forward. Foolishness is refusing to know. It's having access to wisdom and rejecting it. It's making the same mistakes repeatedly and calling it bad luck. It's confusing confidence with competence and volume with understanding. The ancient philosophers, from Socrates to Solomon, understood that wisdom isn't about intelligence. Some of the smartest people make the most foolish choices. Some of the most educated people demonstrate the worst judgment. Because wisdom isn't what you know, it's what you do with what you know. It's recognizing patterns, learning from consequences, thinking beyond the immediate, understanding what you don't understand. The fool lacks this entirely, and you can hear it in how he speaks. Today, we're examining 7 statements of a foolish person, not to mock anyone, because we've all been foolish at times, but to recognize the patterns, to identify the thinking that leads to poor outcomes, broken relationships, and wasted years. Because the Stoics believed that wisdom is the highest virtue, and recognizing foolishness, that's the first step toward wisdom. Let's define what we mean by foolishness. A fool isn't someone who lacks intelligence. Plenty of high IQ individuals demonstrate consistent foolishness. A fool isn't someone who makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. A fool isn't even someone who fails. Failure is often a prerequisite for success. A fool is someone who refuses to learn, who makes the same errors repeatedly and blames circumstances, who ignores wise counsel because it conflicts with what they want to do, who thinks short-term gratification is worth long-term consequences, who can't distinguish between what sounds good and what is good. Proverbs 26:11 puts it bluntly, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly." The fool is trapped in a cycle. The same destructive patterns, the same poor decisions, the same predictable outcomes, and somehow each time it's a surprise. Each time it's someone else's fault. Each time, this time will be different. But it never is, because the fool hasn't changed the thinking that created the problem. Socrates famously said, "I know that I know nothing." That wasn't humility performance. It was genuine recognition that wisdom begins with acknowledging the limits of your understanding, with being willing to question your assumptions, with staying open to being wrong. The fool operates from the opposite premise. I know everything I need to know. My perspective is complete. My judgment is sound. Anyone who disagrees is wrong, threatened, or jealous. And that certainty, that unwillingness to examine, to learn, to adapt, is what makes foolishness so destructive. Because here's the thing, foolishness compounds. One poor decision leads to another, one ignored. Warning becomes a pattern. One missed lesson becomes a lifetime of repetition. The wise person learns from their mistakes. The foolish person defends them. The wise person seeks counsel. The foolish person resents it. The wise person thinks in timelines and consequences. The foolish person thinks in impulses and immediate comfort. And you can hear the difference in their language, in the statements they make, in the way they talk about their choices, their circumstances, their lives. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." The wise person understands this and remains humble about what they know. The foolish person mistakes their opinion for fact, their perspective for universal truth. So let's examine the 7 statements, not as condemnation, but as diagnosis. Because if you hear yourself in these words, that's not a life sentence, it's a wake-up call. Foolishness is correctable, but only if you first recognize it. 1. I already know that. This is the signature statement of a closed mind. Someone offers insight, shares a lesson, provides information. The fool's response, "Yeah, I already know that." But if you already knew it, why aren't you applying it? Why isn't it reflected in your life? Why are you still making the same mistakes? Because there's a massive difference between knowing something intellectually and understanding it practically, between having heard it once and having integrated it into how you live. The fool thinks exposure equals understanding. He heard it, so he knows it. He read it once, so he's mastered it, and therefore he doesn't need to hear it again. But the wise person understands that deep truths need repetition, that hearing something multiple times, from different angles at different stages of life, creates layers of understanding you couldn't access with a single exposure. Epictetus taught his students the same principles, repeatedly, not because they hadn't heard them, but because knowing isn't enough. You have to practice until it becomes part of you. When you say, "I already know that," you're closing the door on deeper understanding. You're announcing that you've reached the limits of what you need to learn about this topic. And that's almost never true. The wise person says, "I've heard that before. Tell me more. What's your experience with it?" Or, "I know the concept, but I'm still working on applying it." That's humility. That's openness. That's wisdom recognizing its own incompleteness. The reframe, not, "I already know that," but "I've heard that, help me understand it more deeply." Or, "I know it intellectually, but I'm struggling to live it." The fool thinks knowledge is about collection. The wise person knows it's about integration. 2. That would never happen to me. This is foolishness as overconfidence, the inability to learn from others' mistakes. You show them a cautionary tale, a friend who lost everything gambling, a colleague whose marriage imploded from infidelity, a business that collapsed from poor planning. The fool's response, "That would never happen to me. I'm smarter than that. I'm different. I'd never make that mistake." But you're not different. You're not immune. You're subject to the same human weaknesses, the same poor judgment under pressure, the same capacity for rationalization and self-deception. The wise person sees others' mistakes as warnings. The fool sees them as entertainment or evidence of others' inferiority. This is what gets people destroyed. They see someone lose their career over an inappropriate relationship. That would never happen to me. Until it does. They see someone spiral into addiction. I'm too strong for that. Until they're not. They see someone's business fail. I'm too smart to make those errors. Until they make worse ones. Solomon, the wisest king in Scripture, wrote, "Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit before a fall." When you think you're above a particular type of failure, you stop guarding against it. You stop being vigilant. You stop learning from others who fell into that trap. And that's when you're most vulnerable. The wise person says, "I can see how that happened. What can I learn from this so I don't end up in a similar situation?" They study failure, others and their own, not to judge but to extract wisdom, to understand the patterns, to recognize the early warning signs. The reframe, not "that would never happen to me," but "how did that happen? What were the warning signs? How can I avoid that path?" Humility learns from everyone. Pride learns from no one. 3. I don't need help. I'll figure it out myself. This is stubborn independence masquerading as strength. Someone offers assistance, guidance, expertise. The fool refuses. "I don't need help. I'll figure it out myself." There's a time for self-reliance, for developing your own problem-solving capacity, for not being dependent on others. But there's also profound foolishness in refusing wisdom, expertise, and support when it's offered, especially when refusing it costs you time, money, relationships, or opportunities. The fool sees asking for help as weakness, as admission of inadequacy. So he stumbles forward alone, learning everything the hard way, taking 10 years to learn what someone could have taught him in 10 minutes. And he calls this being independent. But it's not independence. It's waste. Waste of time, waste of resources, waste of potential. Proverbs 12:15 states, "The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice." The wise person understands that every master was once a student, that learning from those who've walked the path before you isn't weakness, it's efficiency. It's respect for wisdom. Yes, you can figure most things out yourself, given enough time and enough failures. But why would you choose that when accumulated wisdom is available? The fool's pride costs him years. The wise person's humility accelerates his growth. And here's the deeper issue. Refusing help isn't just about you. It's about the people affected by your preventable failures. Your family who suffers while you figure it out yourself. Your business that struggles because you wouldn't hire expertise. Your health that deteriorates because you wouldn't listen to professionals. Your independence at their expense isn't strength. It's selfishness disguised as self-reliance. The reframe, not "I don't need help," but "I appreciate the offer. Let me learn from your experience." Not seeing assistance as weakness, but recognizing that wisdom often comes through others. The fool learns everything the hard way. The wise person learns from everyone who's willing to teach. 4. Rules don't apply to me. I'm the exception. This is foolishness as special pleading, the belief that you're uniquely exempt from consequences. Every rule, every principle, every warning, there's always a reason it doesn't apply to you. You're different. Your situation is unique. The normal consequences won't happen in your case. You don't need to save money. You'll always figure it out. You don't need to maintain your health. You're naturally resilient. You don't need to invest in your relationships. They'll always be there. You don't need to plan ahead. Things always work out for you until they don't. Because universal principles are universal. Physics doesn't care about your uniqueness. Economics doesn't make exceptions for your confidence. Biology doesn't pause because you think you're special. The fool operates as if he's exempt from natural consequences, as if the rules that govern everyone else somehow don't apply to him. And he genuinely believes this until reality proves otherwise, often catastrophically. Marcus Aurelius, who had absolute power, still subjected himself to discipline and principle. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. Even an emperor recognized he wasn't exempt from universal laws. Even absolute power didn't make him the exception. But the fool thinks his confidence or intelligence or charm makes him special, makes the normal rules irrelevant. So he speeds without wearing a seatbelt, plays with fire without expecting to get burned, betrays trust without expecting to lose it, ignores his health without expecting consequences. And when consequences arrive, as they always do, he's shocked. It was supposed to be different for him. The reframe, not "rules don't apply to me," but "these principles exist for a reason. I should respect them." Not "I'm the exception," but "I'm subject to the same natural consequences as everyone else." Wisdom respects universal principles. Foolishness thinks it transcends them. "I'll do it later. There's always more." Time, this is foolishness as procrastination. The delusion that time is infinite. Important things get delayed. Crucial conversations get postponed. Necessary changes get pushed to tomorrow, next week, next year. The fool lives as if time is unlimited, as if there's no urgency to address what matters, as if later is guaranteed, but it's not. The relationship you keep meaning to repair, the person might not be there later. The health issue you keep ignoring, it might be irreversible later. The opportunity you keep postponing, it might not exist later. The skill you keep meaning to learn, you might not have the capacity later. Seneca wrote extensively about the brevity of life. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. The fool wastes time as if it's unlimited. The wise person treats it as the most precious, non-renewable resource. And here's what makes this particularly foolish. We all know time is finite. We all know people die unexpectedly. We all know opportunities close. We all know health declines. We all know relationships end. We know these things. But the fool operates as if he doesn't, as if his awareness of mortality is intellectual only, never practical. So he delays what matters and rushes what doesn't. He spends hours on trivial distractions and claims he doesn't have time for what's important. He lives reactively, always planning to get serious later, and later never comes. Or it comes too late. The reframe, not "I'll do it later," but "if this matters, I need to prioritize it now." Not "there's always more time," but "time is the one thing I can't get back. How am I investing it?" The fool lives as if time is infinite. The wise person lives as if it's running out, because it is. 6. Everyone else is wrong. If people understood, they'd agree with me. This is foolishness as intellectual isolation, the inability to consider that you might be wrong. When everyone around you is saying one thing and you're saying another, there are two possibilities. 1, you're uniquely insightful and everyone else is mistaken. 2, you're wrong and you can't see it. The fool always assumes it's the first. Everyone else is wrong. They don't understand. They're not as smart, informed, or enlightened. But when multiple people, especially people you respect, who have expertise, who want good for you, are all saying similar things and you're dismissing all of them, that's not wisdom. That's foolishness. The wise person thinks, if this many people are seeing something I'm not, maybe I should examine my position more carefully. Maybe I have a blind spot. The fool thinks, if this many people disagree with me, it just proves how rare my insight is. Proverbs 18:2 captures this perfectly. Fools find no pleasure in understanding but delight in airing their own opinions. The fool isn't interested in truth. He's interested in being right. So he interprets all disagreement as others' failure to understand his superior perspective. This makes him unteachable, unchangeable, stuck in whatever errors he's committed to defending, and it destroys relationships, because who wants to be around someone who's never wrong, who always has an explanation for why everyone else is mistaken, who can't admit error or uncertainty? The reframe, not everyone else is wrong, but if multiple people are seeing this differently, I should examine why. Not if people understood, they'd agree. But maybe I'm missing something. Help me understand your perspective. The fool is always right. The wise person is frequently learning. 7. I don't care what anyone thinks. This sounds like strength. It's actually foolishness disguised as independence. I don't care what anyone thinks. I do what I want. There's a place for not being controlled by others' opinions, for making unpopular decisions based on principle, for standing alone when you're right and others are wrong. But I don't care what anyone thinks as a blanket philosophy. That's not strength. It's foolishness. Because some people's opinions should matter. Your mentor's assessment of your work, your spouse's feelings about your behavior, your doctor's concerns about your health, your children's need for your presence. When you declare that no one's perspective has value, when you operate as if you're the only judge that matters, you cut yourself off from feedback, accountability, and growth. The wise person cares about the right opinions. He's selective. He values input from people who have expertise, who love him, who have his best interests at heart. He listens, considers, and then decides. The fool either cares about everyone's opinion, seeking constant validation, or no one's opinion, rejecting all feedback. Both extremes are foolish. Epictetus taught, if someone speaks badly of you, consider the source. If they're foolish, their opinion means nothing. If they're wise, examine whether their criticism has merit. The wise person evaluates the source, considers the content, and integrates what's useful while discarding what's not. The fool just announces, I don't care what anyone thinks, and keeps making the same mistakes while everyone around him sees exactly what he can't. The reframe, not "I don't care what anyone thinks," but "I care about the opinions of people who have earned my trust and respect." Not rejecting all feedback as irrelevant, but being discerning about whose input you value and integrate. The fool is an island. The wise person is part of a community of growth. Look at those 7 statements. I already know that would never happen to me. I don't need help. I'll figure it out myself. Rules don't apply to me. I'm the exception. I'll do it later. There's always more time. Everyone else is wrong. If people understood, they'd agree. I don't care what anyone thinks. Each one closes a door to wisdom. Each one chooses pride over learning, certainty over growth, isolation over community. And taken together, they create a life of repeated mistakes, missed opportunities, broken relationships, and preventable disasters. Because here's what foolishness guarantees. You'll learn eventually. The question is whether you'll learn from wisdom or from pain. The wise person learns from others' experiences, not just their own. Principles and patterns, not just trial and error. Counsel and feedback, not just personal discovery. Consequences they observe, not just consequences they suffer. The foolish person learns only from their own painful experience. Repeated mistakes. Consequences that can't be ignored, crises that force change. Both paths lead to learning, but one is far more costly than the other. And here's what makes foolishness tragic. It's usually temporary if you're willing to recognize it. You don't have to stay foolish. You don't have to keep making the same mistakes. You don't have to insist on learning everything the hard way. You can choose wisdom today, right now. You can start saying, "Tell me more, I want to understand this better. I can see how that happened to them. What can I learn from it? I'd appreciate your help with this. These principles exist for good reason. I should respect them. If this matters, I need to address it now. Multiple people are saying this. I should examine why. I value the opinions of people who've earned my trust." That shift from defensive foolishness to open wisdom changes everything. Your relationships improve because you're teachable. Your decisions improve because you're learning from more sources. Your outcomes improve because you're not repeating the same errors. Your growth accelerates because you're not wasting years on preventable mistakes. The Stoics believed wisdom was the highest virtue, not intelligence, not knowledge. Wisdom, the ability to apply what you know, to learn from what you see, to adjust based on feedback, to think in consequences rather than impulses. And wisdom begins with recognizing foolishness, with being willing to examine your own thinking and admit when it's led you astray. Socrates was considered the wisest man in Athens, not because he knew everything, but because he knew what he didn't know. No. He remained open, curious, willing to be wrong, willing to learn. That's not weakness. That's the foundation of all growth. The fool says, "I know." The wise person says, "I'm learning." The fool says, "I'm the exception." The wise person says, "I'm subject to the same principles as everyone." The fool says, "I don't need anyone." The wise person says, "I learn from everyone willing to teach." Which one are you choosing to be? Here's your practice. For the next week, catch yourself when you're about to say any of these 7 statements. Pause before the words leave your mouth. Ask yourself, is this wisdom or foolishness speaking? Am I closing a door to learning or opening one? When someone offers advice, fight the urge to say, "I already know that." Instead, ask, "What's your experience with this?" When you see someone's mistake, resist, "That would never happen to me." Instead, think, "How did that happen? What can I learn?" When you're about to refuse help, pause. Consider whether your pride is costing you growth. This isn't about becoming someone who has no confidence or opinions. It's about becoming someone whose confidence is earned through wisdom rather than defended through foolishness. The Stoics knew the unexamined life isn't worth living, and the examined life begins with recognizing when foolishness is speaking. Be wise enough to recognize your own foolishness. That recognition is the beginning of wisdom. Stay focused, stay grounded, and remember, the quiet work you do today is shaping the strength they'll never see coming.